Okay, first I would like to say I apologize. It's taken a while to get to this video. Um, I wasn't expecting the level of confusion that I found. And then I stumbled upon an article that just kind of epitomizes uh, much of what is uh, uh, discussed by many MGTOW all across YouTube. First, the article. I found this to be quite hilarious. It appears that in China there was a panda that faked a pregnancy so that way it could receive special treatment. Apparently, the panda had figured out that if you're pregnant, you get more food. If you're pregnant, you get special treatment. So the panda faked a pregnancy in order to gain access to these additional resources. I couldn't help it. I saw it and I just had to. To go and look at it. It was funny. Uh, they're typically held in like communal rooms, but if they're pregnant, they get their own room, and it's air conditioned. They are literally lying and using any and every physical asset in order to attain any and every advantage that they are capable of receiving. I find this quite humorous because it is essentially the same basic behavior we see in many human females. This leads me into the other part of this video. In a previous video titled "Targeting Testosterone," I was talking about an observation I had made about a time span of age in which it seems every female in essentially every society on this planet essentially pressures males into the concept of marriage and paternity during the time span from when they are 15 to 35, and this accelerates during this time period from 20 to 35, and as we can assume, as men get into the workforce, they're earning a paycheck, they become more and more valuable. Even more pressure is applied to these men from the age of 28 to 35. And if you have reached the age of 32, and I'm sure some of us have experienced this, there's always that mother, aunt, neighbor down the road screaming at you that it is your duty to get married and that you shouldn't be afraid of commitment. No, I'm just afraid that if I even consider that route ever again, I should probably be committed. But getting back, I had pointed out some of these things in the other video, and with this panda thing, it just kind of rolls into it. Now, in the other video, I was contemplating as to whether or not it was the specific result of testosterone that is the actual trigger for all of this. And I was looking into it. I kept coming across oxytocin, the love hormone, which is also interesting that oxytocin in females is released during orgasm. Now, it is also released during childbirth, not specifically after. That also occurs, but actually during childbirth. It seems to have a pain-killing effect. Now, what is also interesting, and we're not exactly sure why, and I haven't been able to find a single article in any medical journal or Nature or phys.org, Live Science, Science Daily, anything. If anyone knows of one, it would be greatly appreciated. But anyways, getting back on point, there is this weird interaction of hormones, and I mean the differences in outward behavior is the result of minute changes in specific levels within the total mixture. For example, if a woman sits there and praises her husband, boyfriend, brother, whatever, right? Two things happen. One, additional testosterone is released. I found this to be odd, but it kind of makes sense once you start looking at the other side of it. Part of the testosterone thing is male competition, and we tend to thrive on that. But what surprised the living hell out of me was the fact that at the same time our levels of oxytocin rise. That would indicate right there that there is a tie in between the two. Now, I found that interesting. It was actually really interesting. But there's also the fact that oxytocin is released around other men, but in different levels in comparison to when it's released around other women. Now, these are people that we have no romantic inclination towards. Now, if it's around men, there's the release of testosterone, cortisol, and a small amount of oxytocin. This combination of hormones actually triggers anxiety. It triggers the essentially base programming of our fight or flight reactions. But when you change just a little bit of any one of those hormones, the reactions of the host is changed dramatically. For example, if it's just oxytocin and cortisol, which one would expect like during the time child rearing, as you're taking care of your children, your testosterone levels are not going up. They're actually kind of going down. Your oxytocin levels are increasing, but as a result of the environment in itself, so are your cortisol levels. And we don't react to our children the way we do to a group of guys. Now, on the other hand, if you remove the oxytocin in a somewhat hostile environment, and you have mainly testosterone and cortisol, there tends to be a much greater propensity for being able to handle a violent interaction. We're almost primed in many of these ways, and our societies globally seem to be based around these chemical reactions that are constantly occurring within our bodies. I think this is where I should kind of point out that before I get a little further into this, I think this essentially proves that as long as we are capable of remaining coherent, remaining conscious of our decisions and trying to remove as much emotion as possible, essentially become Spock, we have a chance to actually go and control these biological machines that support our identity, our mind, our consciousness. We do have the ability to go and overwrite this stuff, but it takes a lot of effort. Anyways, getting back to some of the information. With women, all right, not only do they release oxytocin within their own bodies, but it's also mixed in with their sweat and excreted through their sweat glands. It's also mixed in with their pheromones. So that it actually acts as a trigger. The actual levels of oxytocin in relation to other hormones and other fluids or bodily compounds, you can have the same ingredients, but if you just change something a little bit, you get dramatically different results. Honestly, I had thought we were a whole lot further on the study of this than we actually are. It's really actually kind of pathetic. We really need some R&D on this. Now, if a woman is nagging a man, screaming, yelling, throwing stuff at him, his testosterone level drops. So that can also be seen as a instinctual source of control, because as a man's testosterone level drops, he's easier to control. He's less aggressive, and typically with that comes a buildup of fat cells, which help produce additional estrogen, which makes the male even more docile. What I found interesting in all of this is when on-one interactions between partners, whatever, wife, girlfriend, someone you are intimately involved with, men release more oxytocin than women. I found this extremely interesting, since oxytocin is the hormone that essentially lubricates our emotional centers. This would seem to indicate that men actually feel emotions more strongly than women do, at least in these specific environments. Women release more oxytocin when climaxing from sex, meaning it is a reward. The oxytocin itself is an additional benefit from just going off and getting laid. Now, around children, females' oxytocin levels are also higher. However, while around children, these elevated levels are then excreted through, the sweat, which is then picked up by the child, which reacts through the olfactory receptors of said child, which then triggers an oxytocin reaction within the child. So this can actually explain as to why so many people are so attached to their mothers and so unwilling to look at their mothers critically. I guess in my case, I'm lucky. I didn't grow up with my mother, so that was never an issue. Uh, I couldn't tell you if I'd had the same mind if I had grown up with her. I didn't have that emotional or chemical attachment. Yeah, I know I sound like a cold-hearted bastard, and in many ways, I am. Uh, but we are who we are, and who we are is a combination of experiences that we have had. Now, getting back on point, it is also interesting that for us as men, by doing what we instinctively do, we try to solve problems. All right. As we try to solve problems, that pisses them off, and we don't know why. We kind of do. What happens is this is actually an oxytocin and a cortisol reaction that is assisted by the presence of estrogen. As a woman is trying to tell us a problem, and we explain it, or we try and solve the problem, okay? That releases the stress hormone, cortisol. What also happens is that at this point in time, as a result, her levels of oxytocin actually drop. Heightened levels of stress, less emotional attachment. A woman is far more likely to react as we would see it as irrational. Estrogen assists in the bonding of oxytocin to its receptors. So the more estrogen there is, the easier it is to go and get this hormone into the receptors. Males just, in some cases, produce 3 times as much as women, which I personally find somewhat frightening. On the flip side, if a man essentially sits there and panders to the woman, all right, the article has specified, if he makes her feel felt. Yeah, it sounded retarded. Essentially, you have to be an emotional tampon. I think that's the best way to describe this one. By doing that, you actually raise her levels of oxytocin. And in the process, you lower her levels of cortisol. However, as a result of this, right, as the lowering of cortisol, the expansion of oxytocin, and the presence of estrogen, testosterone levels drop like a fucking stone. This is the hormone that, as we all know, essentially pushes the human sex drive. I honestly think this is kind of where the whole friend zone thing comes from. I know it sounds weird, but hear me out. Their emotional needs are met. The oxytocin is getting to where it wants to go, and it is releasing dopamine like a motherfucker. And the testosterone levels drop, so they're less interested in sex, but they are at the same time emotionally fulfilled. And the lack of stress, well, who doesn't like a break from stress? But it allows them to it gives a sense of anxiety relief. I think this is actually kind of where the friend zone thing comes in, and I'll be honest, I kind of stumbled on some of this stuff, but the further I had gone into it, the more sense it made. Uh, I would encourage you to look into this yourself and see if you can come up with any other ideas or theories. Because the more people putting ideas out, even more people will start thinking about it, and the more minds we have trying to solve a problem, the more readily an answer will most likely present itself. Now, when testosterone is running the show, men are very competitive. But once it's only testosterone and oxytocin, which seems to be the case between couples, and especially men when it involves their wives or girlfriends, what it is that it directly ties emotional feelings to the acquisition of sexual stimulation. In effect, we see we see it as though if a woman cheats on us, that is an emotional blow that, as a result of producing 3 times as much oxytocin as women do in these situations, that actually helps explain, I think, why the suicide rate is so high among men, and why the rate of depression is so high among men. A lot of this, I think, can actually be worked down to our hormones and chemical reactions. Since this is a biological issue that every human exhibits, and apparently so do pandas, this has to be fairly common throughout the animal kingdom. So the roots of this is literally within our lizard brain, our most primitive selves. The only way we can overcome this as a race is to become a race of the mind. Essentially, become Vulcans that like to go on spring break and get to motorboat some giant titties. But looking into the interactions of these hormones, I'm beginning to see why we react the way we do, and how and why we have set up society the way we have. However, as this becomes more evident, I am also a witness to all of its shortcomings. Because we evolved this way literally over tens of millions of years, since this is a seemingly common trait throughout the animal kingdom. This is essentially got to go back to we're talking like before dinosaurs, like Precambrian. But anyways, tell me as to what you think. I really think this is a step in the right direction. The fact that we can now identify not specific hormones with certain behaviors, but certain combinations of many hormones. I mean, including dopamine, especially for men and women when it comes to sex. Women tend to release high levels of oxytocin, which then go and trigger a huge release of dopamine. Uh, Essentially, chemically speaking, it's essentially like heroin for a woman, but it's produced inside of her own skull. Which can explain as to why it seems as though women tend to essentially be, well, sex addicts. It could very well be an actual addiction to a natural hormone that they themselves produce, which could actually make it quite difficult to detect. But please, I want some opinions on this. I don't know. I found a lot of this weird. I wasn't expecting to go as in depth as I did on some of this, but to be quite honest, I was expecting there to be a lot more research involved. Well, thank you, and please tell me what to what you think. And sorry, this is so damn long.